let's get right into it, shall we? College conference realignment doesn't really have much to do with wrestling or MMA or whatever, but maybe in a way it does. Maybe we're just going to expand into college sports here and stuff, So let's get right into it, shall we? Everyone's probably heard about it over the weekend, but USC and UCLA made the shocking announcement to the world that they are leaving the Pac-12 conference and they are packing their bags and going to the Big Ten. And it will start the academic year 2024. Their contract with the Pac-12 expires on June 30th, and their new contract will be set up and completed with the Big Ten starting in August 2024. Now, Matthew, we know that, like our grandfather said, tradition be damned, basically, because this is what it's all about now. I mean, we saw that with the fact that Texas and Oklahoma were willing to leave the Big 12 in order to go to the SEC, and we know for a fact that.
Yeah, well, let's face it. The Big 12 is not that old. In fact, of the Power 5 and all the other major conferences, it's probably the youngest if you exclude, the big East American split, which it technically football-wise the
well, and you know that this is
football-wise the American is the Big East. It's just under a different name.
Well, and we know for a fact that this is all about the football. This is all about the football money, and secondly, about the basketball money. And and like Dad had been mentioning, Pac-12, the money that the Pac-12 gives out to their teams is approximately about $37 million a year. But if they go to the Big Ten, then that number almost doubles because it's going to be approximately $54 million. So,
something we talked about, when we had our family discussions, but something that we talked about is the Big Ten network is a much bigger, broader, more successful college network. It's probably the only profitable network.
Well, and the fact that, kind of getting into wrestling a bit, Big Ten Network on YouTube is probably the only one I've seen besides the Big 12. I'll have to go back and look at some of the other networks, but they're the only ones that will put like full wrestling duels, on YouTube.
I think the big I think the EIWA will do some.
Yeah. Well, they have to because they're a wrestling conference. But, I think just, it is personally to me, this is kind of a turnoff of just how these conferences have to realign instead of, honoring tradition the way it is. And this is going to be, as a whole, crippling to the Pac-12 because what other names does the Pac-12 have if they, if they're losing USC and UCLA? I mean, that is the main draw.
Yeah, because let's face it, UCLA and USC, though, obviously UCLA known for basketball and UCLA known for basketball and USC known for football, even though they're not exactly there, they're still big names in terms of those sports. And they're big names in general. Like, I think even compared to like the Ivy Leagues, the hardest school to get into the hardest college to get into in the United States is UCLA.
That's because it's the most applied to.
Yeah. So everyone wants to go there. It's like everyone. It's like if they'd had wrestling, I would have wanted to go there. I wouldn't have gone in because I didn't have the academics, but I would have wanted to try to go there. And everyone wants to go there.
Right.
So,
it's the most applied to, which
and
makes
if
it
you
the
don't
most.
go there, you settle for USC.
Yeah, because I'm not so sure USC has a, whether or not they have a cap is another story, because USC, they operate on the money, obviously. But so, and again, these moves, when you have these big names that are the mainstays of the conferences, when these schools are going to jump ship, it's really crippling to those conferences that are having, that those names have supported them all these years. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma going out.
They were the Big 12.
Right. They were the Big 12. Now the Big 12 kind of made up for that by bringing in, some other big names, UCLA.
But that's only going to balance them out in terms of like the overall competition.
Yeah, does it balance it out?
The reality is the reality is they will lose money, and they're not going to be on the same competitive level. That's just how it is.
No, because how are you going to, in marketing terms, and this is where it's really unfortunate. In marketing terms, how are you going to compete with the SEC? How are you going to compete with the Big Ten? I mean, I would not be surprised if even the is it the other one, I think, is it the ACC, or is it
the ACC? Yeah.
Is it the ACC?
Of the Power Five? Yeah, it's the ACC.
Yeah, because they're the ones that have Florida State, right? I think. And
they have Florida State.
I mean,
they have Notre Dame and everything except for football.
Right. Well, and can you imagine? That's probably what's going to happen, is that probably I gotta imagine that the ACC is probably going to poach some programs next. That's a theory, but it could become a reality. I mean, the thing is that it's the East Coast that's got all the draw power. Big Ten, SEC, ACC. So it's really hard for the Pac-12 and the Big 12 to be competitive with those other three conferences.
Yeah, let's face it. The only names, not necessarily competitive, as I mentioned, but the only names in the Pac-12 are UCLA and USC, and now they're gone.
So and I'm sure that the Pac-12 will probably try to negotiate with some other teams, but it's like, who is there? Who is there that you can get? I mean, I can see something like, I remember that there was, you would hear rumors about, oh, maybe the Oklahomas will go to the Pac-12 or something. And obviously that's not happening, because
one Oklahoma is going to the SEC, the other Oklahoma is staying put in the Big 12.
Yeah. This is really crippling to the Pac-12, because who are they going to get to replace those two schools? There's no one. There's no one that they can get to draw that. I mean,
well, let's also remember the fact that something that to me has just been shocking throughout all of this is that it was kept silent. We knew it was being telegraphed. We knew Texas and Oklahoma were going to move before they even applied. There were talks. It was all over the administration. It was all over the news. We knew it was going to happen before it even was officially announced, before they've submitted their applications, before they were accepted. We didn't hear about this until it was official.
Yeah.
We did not hear about this until the news was said they have applied and they've been accepted. So to me, it's just mind-blowing that they were able to keep it silent.
Yeah, this was quite something. So, I mean, who would they get? I mean, what? UNLV? Hawaii? I mean, who?
Maybe
who
San Diego State.
Who?
Maybe San Diego State.
Maybe. Again, this is, yeah. Which, and
the ramifications of this, it's like, this is just so crippling. The Pac-12 is not going to they're not going to make the money.
They're not going to recover from this.
This blow, I think that's just, in terms of money, it's not happening. They're not going to make the kind of money.
Yeah, they have no negotiating power now with the networks. And that's, again, that's where I'm really.
That's what this was all about. I mean, because the rights were coming up, all the major contracts were coming up. That's what this was all about. That's as we discussed, this is all about money. UCLA and USC are going to get twice as much as members of the Big Ten than they would as members of the Big 12 of the Pac-12.
Which is why it's really unfortunate that it's come down to this, that it's all about the money now. That so now the Big Ten will continue to have the divisions and stuff, and I gotta imagine that they'll probably stay in the Western Division. I can't imagine that they would realign.
I thought that they were going to get rid of. I thought that all the major conferences were going to get rid of divisions because of the NCAA rule changes.
Oh, I haven't paid much attention to that, but
the NCAA got rid of the rule that would require essentially divisions in order to justify having a championship game.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So there's
probably because they don't want Alabama losing in the conference title game. That's what they don't. They don't want that because they don't want Alabama missing out on the playoff. Or Ohio State.
That could still happen.
Or Ohio State missing out on the playoffs, because that those two schools are the big draws. And again, this is now going to get SC into the playoffs, because they definitely want SC in the playoffs. I'm sure SC strategically was looking at this and like, you know what? If we're in the Big Ten, we have a much better chance of getting into the playoffs versus being in the Pac-12. So
I don't know, because you look at the competitive schools in the Big Ten. I mean, they're all pretty competitive as well.
Yeah. So anyway, let's dive a little bit into, okay, so how does this affect wrestling as far as that's concerned? Now, Matthew, as you know, the Big Ten, I believe, is the only conference that all their current members sponsor wrestling. So UCLA and USC do not sponsor wrestling as a competitive NCAA D1 sport. They do both have club wrestling available, so that means that they would compete in the NCAA. But as far as actual D1 competition is concerned, they do not. So could that mean that wrestling could be returning to these two schools?
Well, I think it has to, because as I recall, the reason why all the Big Ten schools have wrestling is because it's one of the core schools it's one of the core sports that's required in their membership. That's my understanding, is that each course, each school for the core sports, they have to have wrestling. You look at some of the other, and you look at a bunch of the other sports. A bunch of the other sports have, full membership teams as well. Now, when you start to get into some of the other sports, like baseball, maybe some of the track sports, stuff like that, it's not as prevalent, or volleyball or whatever. But so I think what's gonna happen is with that amount of money, I think USC and UCLA, because they both have kind of a foundation with those club teams.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I both know that the overhead of wrestling, it's not that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Yeah, so buying mats isn't that. It's like you're gonna get $60 million a year from the Big Ten. Buying mats, not that much. Paying for scholarships, not that much. In the long term scheme of things, the cost of a wrestling program just isn't that much for as a price for a membership into the Big Ten. So they'll if you know the mem if they have to start programs in order to get into the Big Ten, they'll start programs to get into the Big Ten. Because it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested about that. If the Big Ten is going to really follow through, and I'm wondering if they negotiated that or not. So, but I saw an interesting name. He expressed some interest, and so Jordan Burroughs tweeted at USC and UCLA if they need a wrestling coach. So kind of following
that kind of reinforces the whole thing that we've been talking about. It's a requirement of their membership. So, and
yeah,
Burroughs knows that he's only got so long. So,
right, because he's going to try and compete for 2024, which means that he'll try and challenge Kyle Dake. And I'm very sure if he, that means that he's going to have to cut down to 74 kilos, which, that's going to be quite a drain, to get down there. And I'm certain that 2024 happens and that's it. Whether he wins or loses to get onto the Olympic team, I'm very sure 2024 is, and he could have other thoughts, he could try to continue, but, I got to think that if he doesn't get in there, it's it is what it is. But, I think that'd be quite something, if he were to become coach of one of those teams. I'm very sure that if
he becomes coach, people are going to go there just because of the fact that he is the coach. Obviously, we've seen it all over the place. It takes a while to establish a wrestling program, but he goes there, he's going to have a lot more recruiting power than any other coach.
Yeah, and imagine if you can, imagine the SoCal wrestlers and probably even the Central Valley wrestlers that would want to go and be able to train with Burroughs. If definitely if he were to get in there, I'd be all for that.
Yeah, like one example it's point out is, John Smith took over the Oklahoma State wrestling team shortly after he won his
gold medals.
His gold medal and at the Barcelona games. So he just transitioned from an active wrestler to a wrestling coach, and then he won his first NCAA championship after that. So it makes perfect sense. 2024 is when the transition happens. So he goes out there, he wrestles, and when whether it qualifies or not, he goes out there and he does what he does, and then it's like after that, he's got a job waiting for him in retirement.
That would, it would be a bittersweet thing, the fact that these two schools leaving the Pac-12, if that's what resurrects wrestling at these schools,
so be it.
Well,
resurrected it at UCLA. I don't think USC ever had a wrestling team.
I think they did. It just wasn't that good.
Okay. Well, yeah, because in our father, who was a UCLA alumni, back when he went there, they actually had an NCAA champion, and then and then the program got cut like a year later.
Yeah.
But I do. Well, something else. Obviously, the big worry is Title IX, because in the name of Title IX is why we have basically half the wrestling programs that we did pre-Title IX. But the one big advantage we have now is women's wrestling.
So we could see women's wrestling being brought up at these two schools too. Maybe if somehow there's a condition worked out for that, you get
Yeah, if you think about it, it's like they use essentially the same. It's like most wrestling programs. If they have men and women's wrestling at the same school, they all basically use the same equipment, facilities,
Right.
everything. So there's not going to be a problem. You just you buy the wrestling mats and you got a program.
All right. Well, so chaos incoming, and we'll be talking about this in future episodes for sure, because we're curious. Is the Big Ten actually going to follow through with the requirements it's had for all its programs so far? Does that mean that wrestling will be resurrected at UCLA and USC? So
if they do enforce it, I'm pretty sure UCLA and USC had to read the charters, had to read the membership. They knew what they were getting into when they were signing up. So I'm pretty sure, and like I said, they're getting twice as much money being members of the Big Ten than they are as with the Pac-12. So if that means that they have to buy everything that they need to in order to start a wrestling program, they're going to do it because they're still making money in the end.